Her parents bought her a new dress as a reward. Bellkeepers were so rare, so laudable. An honor. She'd worn it on the train ride into Leighton, pulling at the frilly sleeves as she spied, for the first time, the bell tower rising above St. Trinit's Abbey. Dresses had never suited her gangly arms and legs. She remembered how uncomfortable she'd felt, the fabric tight around her neck, choking her. But maybe that was just the anxiety, climbing the bell tower's single spiral staircase, surrounded on all sides by bells, as many bells as there were stars in the sky, bells of every metal and every size and every hue, with all manner of decoration shaped into their surfaces, flames and scenes of carnage from battles fought long ago and saints and pontiffs long dead, as many bells as grains of sand on all the beaches, climbing and climbing, higher and higher, an honor. At the peak, the bellkeepers cut the dress from her body, just before shaving her long auburn hair to the roots. Olivia, returning to the present, tilted her palm towards the light and looked at her stigmata, a lonely pink petal adrift a boundless white sea. Why? Why indeed, Watery smiled sadly. Who can say why this thing happens and not some other? Why this person is heir to prosperity and another to suffering? Why some sicken while others flourish? Who can say? Is there a reason at all? Or is all this great wide world merely like some spinning coin waiting to turn up either heads or tails? Even the question, when we ask why, is it like shouting into a glass jar hoping someone's listening? He smoothed his uniform and laughed, a quick escape of air from the corner of his lips. I'm rambling again. What did I say of old men? He took from his pocket a small hip flask and took a sip and tucked it back away, before continuing. My point is this. Of all the possibilities through all generations, it is you who stands here. You, the product of inestimable probability. One among a million. It is you who was chosen by the fire, and now it is you who must choose. I wish I could take that choice from you. I wish everyone got exactly what they wanted and nothing else, but that isn't life. Life is a series of choices, good or bad or in between, and life is living with the consequences of those choices, good or bad or in between. All you can do is choose and hope for the best. Here. He hunched his shoulders and dug through his pocket, then pressed something into her palm. When she opened her hand, she saw it was a silver $50. All you can do is hope it comes up heads. Olivia turned the metal coin over in her hand. One side showed the pontiff, the other the sacred fire. The metal was warm with Watery's remembered heat, and she could feel the indentation of the two sides. She squeezed her palms together, hiding the coin. If I leave, then who will watch the bells? No one, at least not until another bellkeeper is chosen. Whether that is in 15 or 100 years, only God knows, if even he knows. And if they didn't want to do it either, be a bellkeeper? Watery smiled again. You've stumbled upon one of life's great tragedies. Some choices aren't choices at all. Someone has to do it. Watery nodded. Someone does. In her mind, the trees of Etnor were collapsing into cinder, the walls of the bell tower closing round her like a prison. She tossed the coin into the air where it turned in a silver arc and returned to her hand. Slowly she opened her fingers. Laying atop the pink bell-shaped stigmata, the coin showed heads. She nodded to herself and took a deep breath. I'll do it, she said, handing the coin back. Heads to stay, Watery nodded sagely. Olivia shook her head. But I couldn't leave a decision like this to chance, could I? Watery laughed. I see. Well, whyever the fire chose you, it chose well. You have a courageous heart. Olivia swallowed the bile rising on the back of her throat. Let's just get this over with, before this courageous heart fails me. Watery nodded and led her to the black chair, and she took a seat. With a wave of his hands, he conjured a tendril of indigo flame at each of Olivia's wrists and ankles, and another at her forehead. The 5 flames wound around her body, up and down her arms and legs, her neck and shoulders, binding her to the chair. Although the lashes crackled like ordinary fire, they were only slightly warm. Watery waved his hand again, and a fire roared to life in the silver basin beside the chair. He then stepped aside. Mr. Knolrick pulled a sharp silver instrument from her robes and placed it into the flames. Olivia tried not to watch, tried not to think about what was coming next. She remembered what Master Kardec had written to her on her first day. The bells shall be your voice, their music your song. Watery stood beside the window, once more gazing out. Olivia could barely see him out of the corner of her eye. Master Kardik pulled Olivia's lips open and forced something between her teeth. She could no longer close her mouth, only watched wide-eyed as Mr. Nolric lifted the instrument from the fire. She drew it level with Olivia's face. Olivia could see bright red runes glowing across the length of the blade, feel the heat of it against her eyes. One's tongue must be given to shape such a voice. This is our covenant. Mr. Nolric lowered the cherry-red metal inch by inch towards Olivia's open mouth. Olivia's resolve abandoned her all at once. She tried to twist in her chair, to turn away, but the bonds were too tight. "I've changed my mind," she tried to shout, but all that came out was a geyser of spittle and a moan. "Please, no." She jammed her eyes closed, tears streaming from the corners. And then it was like her eardrums were shattering. She thought her head might burst. It took a moment for her to comprehend what was happening. In that moment, Watery dispersed her bonds, and she collapsed to the floor, clutching her head. Master Kardik and Mr. Nolric collapsed beside her. A million bells all ringing at once. The force of the sound traveled through the air and through the floor. She felt the ringing inside her chest, pummeling her heart. And then, all at once, it stopped. Olivia lay stunned, curled against the ground. Her eyes rolled around in their sockets. She touched her ears and saw blood. She looked at it without understanding, and then cognizance jammed into her brain. The bells had sounded. That could mean only one thing. They're coming.